Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So we're continuing on with the 5th chapter of Hari Bhakti Vilas, and we were in the middle of the section on Shalagrama Lakshanas, which means the different qualities and characteristics of different Shalagram Shilas. These are iconic stones, self-manifest deities of Lord Vishnu that come from the Nepal region, the Gandaki River in Nepal. And they have the chakra of Vishnu many times on them, just like they look very much like ammonite fossils. So very, very nice that they have these wheels and chakras to show us that they are self-manifest deities of Lord Vishnu, the Krishna. Okay, so let's have a look at the text where we left off last time. So again, we're in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is a book compiled by Gopalbhata Goswami and with a commentary, Digdarshini Tika by Sanatana Goswami. And it is considered to be the Anusthana Shastra of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So, but it deals with many, many scriptures and gives us many, many different quotations, which are applicable for all types of Hindus and Vaishnavas. So here we are in the 5th Vilas, or the 5th chapter, text number 423. It's mentioned here that in the Padma Purana, there's a statement here that says, a person who donates an auspicious Shalagram Shila bearing the markings of a chakra, or the Lord's discus, obtains the result of giving in charity the entire earth along with its mountains, forests, and gardens. So it's very auspicious to donate a Shalagram Shila to some other person, and especially to a devotee or a Vaishnava, so that they can worship that Shalagram Shila. Now, I think we're going to be talking also about the fact that you should not buy and sell Shalagrams, but in fact, they should be donated. They should be given and they should be received without any payment. So continuing on to text, the second text that we're talking about here, text 424 from the Garuda Purana, there's another text which states that the forefathers, or the ancestors, human beings, all holy places, such as the Ganga, which means Ganges River, and Pushkara, there's a sacred lake at Pushkara, as well as the horse sacrifice, reside in the house where a Shalagram Shila adorned with auspicious markings of the chakra is present. So just having a Shalagram in your house makes your house just like a holy place, just like the Ganges or like Pushkar. Pushkar is a famous place. It's one of the places where they have the Kumbh Mela, festival of India. There's a festival. This is from Garuda Purana. Garuda Purana, if we have a mention of Pushkar in Garuda Purana, because there's a story about this Kumbh Mela. The Kumbha is, of course, is a pot, but the pot is not so important. But what is inside the pot is what we call Amrita, or the Nectar of Immortality, which was created from the churning of the ocean of milk. So this is a whole story which we don't need to go into now, but Garuda took that pot, and some drops of nectar of immortality fell down on the earth in 4 places in India. One of them was Rishikesh, or Haridwar, near the Himalayas. One was Pushkar. One was Varanasi, or Allahabad. And I'm forgetting what the 4th place is. But anyway, every 4 years, they have this huge festival, which is in fact the greatest festival, the biggest festival in human history. So many people millions of people come together for this festival to bathe in the Ganges at that time. So it's mentioned here, the Ganges, but it's also mentioned Pushkar. Pushkar is a sacred place. Okay, so continuing on with our discussion of the benefits of having one of these Shalagram Shilas, or donating them to Vaishnava. We have in the Padma Purana also in a section on Kartik. Kartik is the month of October, November. It's a holy month. And there's a conversation between Yama and Dhumrakesha. Dhumrakesha. Dhumrakesha, it's an interesting name. Dhumra means smoky, and Kesha means hair. So somebody who has smoky colored hair, or maybe black or gray hair, I'm not sure. Anyway, Yama and Dhumrakesha, there's a conversation between them, text 425. Those who worship Sri Hari in the form of the Shalagram Sheila are blessed by the Lord with the pure intelligence by which they can easily go back to Godhead, meaning going to Vaikuntha or going to Goloka, to the supreme abode of the Lord, and worshiping him there forever, serving him. The Lord who destroys all their sinful reactions also destroys all the sinful reactions. So just by those who worship the Shalagram Sheila, they have all their sinful reactions destroyed. And in fact, we read in other places that if there are any offenses that a person has committed, that if he were specifically, I'm not sure about if he's offending Vaishnavas, which is a very great offense, but specifically if he does the worship of the deity of Lord Krishna or Vishnu, and he commits some what we call seva aparadas, or offenses in deity worship, that simply by worshiping the Shalagram, that he can rid himself of those offenses. So this is one thing. Another quotation is, of course, he can chant different prayers for forgiveness of offenses, just like Bhagavad Gita or the Vishnu Sahasranama, the 1,000 names of Vishnu. That's another way of getting rid of what we call seva aparadas, or offenses that we commit knowingly or unknowingly when we perform the worship of Lord Krishna in the beauty form. So continuing on with text 426, again from this Kartik Mahatmyam, Sri Hari awards liberation to those who worship him in Mathura in the form of the Shalagram Sheila during the month of Kartik. If one worships the Shalagram Sheila with the desire to benefit his forefathers, the Lord delivers them, carrying them to his eternal abode. So this is an interesting point here, that we saw recently that the one great Vaishnava in India has proposed that because a lot of people have died in the recent pandemic from the COVID disease, that many people didn't get a chance to properly perform the ceremonies, the death ceremonies that are supposed to be performed for their ancestors, so that their ancestors go to Pitri Loka, or even that their ancestors may get a better life, or even the ancestors may even go to Sri Vaikuntha if they're Vaishnavas. So what he proposed was that the Bhagavad Saptaha, the reading of the Bhagavatam the Bhagavad Purana over 7 days, and also I believe the discussion on Nalaya Divya Prabandham of the Alvars, the 4,000 Tamil songs of the Alvars. Of course, this was a Ramanuja Vaishnava, a Sri Vaishnava, who suggests this, and I believe they're starting that today. And this will benefit all those people who couldn't do the proper rituals for their beloved, their relatives or their parents who passed away from this pandemic. So he's doing this freely, and putting all of this out on the internet so people can attend, and they can send in the names of their own names and the names of their departed relatives or friends, and have that all included in the Sankalpa, which is the vow that we do when we begin a ritual. So he's doing this freely, for the benefit of all living beings and all those who have suffered and who have died in this pandemic. So I thought that was very nice. I posted this invitation to this on several groups that I belong to, including with other devotees and things like that. So that's nice. So here, the reason I bring that up is because here he's saying that by worshiping the Shalagram, if we desire benefit for our forefathers, for our parents, or for any of our friends or relatives that have passed away, we can worship the Shalagram, and we can worship the Shalagram with this sankalpa, with this vow, that please, O Lord, please benefit our forefathers, benefit those who have passed away or those who have suffered, and please deliver them like that. So that's very nice that it says here that the Lord will take care of our ancestors if we worship the Shalagam Shila. So perhaps in case we didn't do any tarpanas or any shraddhas or any of these things, we can do this. So this is a very a good point. So this is a good pramana, that a good proof from the scripture, from the Padma Purana, that we can mention to people that in case somebody has died and you haven't had time or you haven't been able to perform the proper rituals, you simply arrange for a worship of the Shalagam Shila. You can call up some devotee who has a Shalagam Shila and arrange for them to do that worship on behalf of the departed person or the suffering person, and that will eternally benefit that person. So this is a very, very nice pramana for that. So we should always think, Vaishnavas are very compassionate, and we're always thinking of the benefit of all living beings. We're not absorbed totally in our own situation and our own lives and our own benefits and our own sorrows. What we're interested in the welfare of all living beings, because all living beings are servants of God. We believe that all living beings are servants of God, and therefore we can serve them just because they're a part of God. They're also a part of God, like that. The concept of Vaishnavism is that everything is a part of God, because God, the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, he manifests everywhere. He is all pervasive. He pervades everything. He's there within the heart of all living beings, and so therefore he has given us these bodies. He has given us this world. He has given us everything, and he completely supports and controls us, and therefore we owe everything to him, and therefore we should try to worship him, and not only worship him directly, but also indirectly through all of his creation. We can also seek the benefit of all living beings. So that's very nice. Okay, so then continuing on with this 427, 428 verses. Now from Brihad Naradiya Purana, the word Brihan or Brihad means big, so that it's a big Purana. The Naradiya Purana, the Purana that is has to do with Narada. Some of these Puranas are named after the person who is speaking the Purana, usually, right? So Narada Purana, we have the Padma Purana, we have, Narasimha Purana, Ganesha Purana. There's all these Puranas that are named after the people who are speaking them. So we have that in a story by a person called Yagya Dwaja. Yagya, of course, means sacrifice, and Dwaja means flag. So in sacrifices, we have a Yagashala, or a sacrificial hall, and in the sacrificial hall there'll be flagpoles and flags flying. So the flag flying in the sacrificial hall is called a Yagya Dwaja. Okay, so continue on with the meaning of the sloka given here, and all of these slokas are what we call Mahatmyam, or glorification of the Shalagam Shila, and these glorifications we find throughout Hari Bhakti Vilas, trying to get us to do some of these wonderful services for the Lord, and encouraging us by telling us the glories of these different things. So the glories of Shalagams, of worshipping the Shalagam, is being explained here. So demons, ghosts, spirits, evil spirits, and other such creatures cannot create disturbances where Lord Keshava, meaning Krishna, is present in his form as the Shalagam Shila. So anybody who's having problems with subtle living entities like demons, ghosts, spirits, what we say, Bhuta, Pretas, all this different terminology in Sanskrit, Yaksha, Raksha, Saguhyakas, all these different types. Right? He can simply have a Shalagam Shila in his house or worship a Shalagam Shila, and these creatures, they won't give him any trouble. So indeed, such a place is sanctified and is good as an ashrama, because Lord Madhusudana is present, meaning Lord Krishna. Krishna, the word Madhusudana means Krishna who killed the Madhu demon. There's a demon called Madhu who was killed by Krishna, and he became known as Madhusudana. And Keshava is also a very famous name, which we find in Bhagavad Gita many times. It's for Lord Krishna. Keshava. Keshava has many meanings, actually, the word Keshava. Three primary meanings. Kesha means hair. So Keshava means one with nice hair or beautiful hair. Or, it also means the Lord of Brahma and Shiva. The Lord of Brahma and Shiva. Ka means Brahma, because it's the first letter of the alphabet. The first living being is Ka, or Brahma. And Isha means Shiva. So Ka Isha, Keshava. Keshava means the Lord of Brahma and Shiva. Okay, so it means what did I say? It means the one with fine hair or beautiful hair, the Lord of Brahma and Shiva. And it also means the killer of the Keshi demon. There was also a demon like this Madhu demon that Krishna killed, and he was called the Keshi demon, and Krishna killed him. So it has three primary meanings, the word Keshi. We find it a couple of times in the Vishnu Sahasranama. There are some, in the 1,000 names of Vishnu, there are some names of Vishnu that are repeated, and Keshava is one of those which is repeated. So when we look in the 1,000 names of Vishnu, there's not 1,000 different names, but however, there is different meanings. So they might give the same name once or twice or three times, but there are three different meanings. If the name is given twice or three times, there are different meanings given to it in each place. So that is from Vishnu Sahasranama. So here we have two primary names of Krishna, Keshava and Madhusudana, which are being mentioned, and it's just saying how that if you keep the Shalagram Sheila, you won't be disturbed by all these subtle living entities, and your house becomes as good as an ashrama. So what is I think, is it mentioned here, ashrama? It says tirtha and tapovanam, I think there's a spelling mistake here. It should be tapovanam. Tapovanam is a type of ashram. Tapovanam is the word vanam means a forest, and tapa means austerity. The word tapa actually literally means heat, right? Because in India, normally the sadhus or the holy people, they'll perform austerity in the heat. And there's a very famous austerity where a sadhu will sit in the middle, and he'll put 4 fires around him in the middle of summer. And if anybody who's ever been to India in summer knows it's very, very hot, above 40 degrees centigrade. And people will sit out in the sun with these 4 fires around them, and it's called Panchagni tapas. So tapas is the austerity, right? And specifically, tapa means heat. So it's the austerity of heat that he sits there in the middle, and he has 4 fires around him, and the 5th fire is the sun above on his head. So this is the 5 fires. So this tapovanam is another name for a forest, a place of doing austerities in the forest. So here it's being translated as ashrama. The word ashrama comes from the Sanskrit word ashraya or ashrayati, which means to take shelter. It's a shelter, but it's not an ordinary shelter. It's not just 4 walls and a roof, something to keep the rain off. What it is, an ashrama is specifically some place where you not only shelter your body, but you're going to shelter your mind because some great acharya is there, some great teacher is there who's going to imbibe spiritual teachings to you. And you're not only your body and your mind, but also your soul is going to take shelter there, because that teacher is going to tell you, he's going to explain to you how to take shelter of the Supreme Lord Krishna, like that, which is the goal of Vaishnavism, is to take shelter of Lord Krishna. And there are many ways to take shelter of Lord Krishna, specifically chanting his holy names or worshipping his deity form. In this case, worshipping the Shalagram Sheila. So an ashrama is specifically a place. Sometimes we say matta. A matta is like an ashrama, but an ashrama is a place where people take shelter physically, mentally, and spiritually, and of the Supreme Lord, right? And there are Vaishnavas there to help them do that. So then also the word matta it means a place where they propagate a particular form of philosophy, Vaishnava philosophy. There's different mats like that. So anyway, there are slightly different meanings. So anyway, the point here is that the Shalagam Sheila, if you keep it in your house, if you worship the Shalagam Sheila, your house becomes like that. Any place that you're living with doing that Shalagam Sheila, your place becomes just like that ashrama, where people can come and they can take shelter, meaning they can be protected from the dangers in this material world of birth, death, disease, and old age. Their body can be protected, their mind can be protected, and even their soul can be protected in this place called the ashrama. Nice. Similarly, also in the system, the social system in India, the medieval social system in India mentioned in the scriptures called Varnashrama system. It has 4 ashramas, and those ashramas are also considered to be parts of the human life: Brahmacharya ashrama, Grihastha ashrama, Vanaprastha ashrama, and Sannyasa ashrama. So these are also ashramas. We take shelter of these different parts of different activities and different. We take shelter of different means, social aspects in our life, in the different stages of our life. So that's also what another meaning to the word ashrama. Okay, so anyhow, if you have a shalagram, you're where you are, it becomes just like an ashram, that type of an ashram. So continuing on with the text 429, one who worships 12, right? So we have a specific number here, or 100, and then it's there in the Sanskrit. It says dwadasha. Dwadasha means 12, and satam means 100. So one who worships 12 or even 100 shalagrams with love and devotion achieves greater benefit. So great benefit. And there's a saying, I think we're going to, maybe it's here or maybe another place, that worshipping a certain number of, when actually people worship 12 shalagrams, then they consider that place to be like a tirtha, or a chetra, which is a very holy place. And then if they have worship 12 times 12, 144, that is considered to be like a dharma, which is an even greater holy place, holy dharma. So text 430, we're going to hear some more about that. The results of worshipping more than one Shalagam Sheila. So up until now, we've more or less given many, many benefits from worshipping one Shalagam Sheila. So now it's just being mentioned to worship 12 or worship 100 in the previous verses, talking about greater benefits. So now he's going to mention some verses from the scripture which talk to us about worshipping more than one Shalagram. So Shalagram Sheila worship is very easy. So therefore, you could worship more than one Shalagram at a time. So he's going to explain, is there more benefit from worshiping more than one? So again, there's a Magha Mahatmyam. There's a glorification of the month of Magh, which comes in Padma Purana. So I think if you look in Padma Purana, you'll find a glorification of all the different months of the year. There are different qualities and characteristics of these months, and different rituals that we perform, which come in the calendar year, and which we should be aware of, that we can take advantage of. Different ways to serve the Supreme Lord in that particular month. So in this particular glorification of activities in the month of Magh, there's a conversation between the word samvadi means a conversation. Vada means to speak, and samvada means to get together with somebody else and speak. So it's a conversation between two persons called Devaduta and Vikundala. So this comes in the Padma Purana also. So the meaning of this verse 430 is, O Vaishya, kindly listen as I describe to you the benefit one achieves from worshipping more than one Shalagram Sheila, according to the prescribed rules and regulations. Continuing on with text 432, 431, 432, the benefit one receives by worshipping 12 million Shiva lingas. Okay, so the iconic form of Shiva in the form of a lingam, right? It looks like a phallus, looks like anyway, we won't go into exactly the shape, but Shiva Lingam, everybody's seen the Shiva Lingam. So the Shaivites, they like to worship the Shiva Lingam. So by worshiping 12 million Shiva Lingams with offerings of golden lotus flowers for 12 kalpas. A kalpa is an incredible span of time. If we take this particular yuga that we're in, it's thousands and hundreds of thousands of years long. And if we add them together with all the other yugas, we get a kalpa, and the kalpa is very, very long time. So imagine 12 kalpas. So worshipping 12 million Shiva Lingas with golden lotus flowers for 12 kalpas can be attained. The same result can be attained by worshipping 12 Shalagram Shilas for a single day. So imagine how much greater it is to worship the Shalagram Shila than it is to worship the Shiva Lingam. This is what they're being taught here, like that. Of course, these are Vaishnava scriptures, and they are talking about the worship of Krishna or Krishna, and so naturally they're glorifying that. The devotee who worships 100 Shalagram Shilas. So previously in the previous section, we heard about worshiping 12 Shilas, worshiping 100 Shilas. So now again, he's going to mention the benefit of worshiping 12 Shilas and worshiping 100 Shilas. So 100 Shilas, if you're worshiping 100 Shilas with faith and devotion, the devotee who does that is born in this world as an emperor after residing in the abode of Lord Vishnu. So that's interesting. Obviously we have a little bit of we call shastric scriptural hyperbole here, that the scripture is trying to get us to worship the Shalagram Shila. Is trying to encourage us by telling us that you'll be born as an emperor. Actually, a person who goes and resides in the abode of Lord Vishnu, Vaikuntha, or Goloka Vrindavan, where Lord Krishna is, he doesn't want to come back and become an ordinary material emperor. But here it's just saying, even if you go to Vaikuntha, again, you can become an emperor in this world, by worshiping 100 Shalagrams. It's an interesting thought. I think we take it more as a glorification and not necessarily as something that will literally come true. Anyhow, so continuing on with the next verses, 433 to 435. Again, in the Kartik Mahatmyam, which is the glorification of the month of Kartik, October, November, in the Skanda Purana, there's a conversation between Lord Shiva and his son Kartikeya. And in fact, over the last week because last week we were discussing another section of this, which had some very interesting things. And I looked in my edition of the Skanda Purana, and Skanda Purana is the longest Purana. It's the biggest Purana. So I just have to mention that in South India, many times when people are inquiring about scriptural quotes, and sometimes when you quote from a scripture, people will ask, or sometimes when you give a quote and you explain something, people will ask, well, what scripture does that come from? And normally we want to find out, and we want to search that scripture just to make sure that the person is not fooling us, but telling us correctly that it is actually coming from that scripture. So the Skanda Purana is so vast, though, that practically speaking, anybody can say anything and say it's from Skanda Purana, and nobody has the time or wants to put in the effort to go and search such a vast scripture to see if it's actually correct. So a lot of people, they get away with saying just about anything, and then they say it's in Skanda Purana. Just believe me, it's in Skanda Purana. So this is a big joke in South India. If you're with other Brahmins in South India and or Vaishnavas, and somebody says something, and the other person says, well, where is that from? I never heard that. That's very interesting, but can you prove to me that is actually in the scripture? And the person will say, yes, it's from Skanda Purana, like that. And as soon as a person will say that, as soon as a person says it's from Skanda Purana, the other people will laugh, because nobody knows how big Skanda Purana is. It's such a huge Purana, and nobody can find the end of it. And there's many, many things which are attributed to Skanda Purana, which are not particularly maybe there. Now, that doesn't mean sometimes we have different editions of the Puranas, and we have different manuscripts. So there are there are differences between manuscripts before the printing press was invented. Everything used to be written out by hand. So sometimes the scribes, sometimes people who are writing these scriptures out on manuscripts and copying them out would add verses, or they would leave out verses by mistake, or they would make mistakes in verses, or they would change some words in the verses. And this happens quite a lot. This is called scribal error. And also sometimes if they add or subtract anything, that is also called an interpolation. So sometimes we look for that. We look at the differences between certain manuscripts, and in order to print a book, because now we can print the book, right? We take a manuscript, we take several manuscripts, and we see the different variant readings, and we can create what's called a critical edition. So this is what scholars do. Scholars look at the different editions of a book, they put them all together, and then they list the variations. They list the variations, and it's important for scholarly research. You know, it's not so important for devotion, but it's important for scholarly research to look at the different editions and the different manuscripts of these scriptures. So I was just going to say, there was some very interesting quotes in this conversation between Shiva and his son Kartikeya, or Subramanyam, that we discussed in the last section, right? And I went to see if those things were actually there in my edition of Skanda Purana. I could not find them in my edition of Skanda Purana. I have to tell you frankly, but that doesn't mean that they're not there. It may mean that they're interpolations, or it may not mean that they're interpolations, that they were put in or taken out for some reason. We have to look at all the different editions, and we have to look at all the manuscripts of Skanda Purana. So here, what we do is when we come across something like that, we have to give the acharyas what we call the benefit of the doubt. So if Gopalbhata Goswami and Sanatana Goswami have presented us with certain verses, and they say that they come from a particular place in Skanda Purana, and when we look in our present day Skanda Purana, we don't find them, then we have to think, well, 500 years ago when Hari Bhakti Vilasa was being written, perhaps there was an edition of Skanda Purana that included those verses. That's we have to give the acharyas the benefit of the doubt, and we have to accept what they say, like that. So in very rare cases, when we don't trust the person, you know, of course we trust our acharyas, but if we don't trust the person, and the person is trying to tell us something, then of course we want to check out the sources. But in the case of our acharyas, in the Guru Parampara, in our particular sampradayam, we will give them every benefit of the doubt that they are presenting as something that they've found in the scriptures. But it may have been hundreds of years ago, and they may have been looking at a different manuscript of the scripture than we are looking at today. Okay, so that having been said, we come to another section here, like we had before, of that same conversation, which had some very interesting things to say last time. And let's see what Shiva says to Kartikeya in this Kartik Mahatmam section of Skanda Purana. So Lord Shiva says, let me describe to you the good fortune of a Vaishnava who worships 12 Shalagam Shilas. The result one obtains by worshipping 12 Shiva Lingas, 12 million, and this is reiterated in that other quote, 12 million Shiva Lingas on the banks of the Ganges, or by residing in the holy city of Kashi. Kashi is another name for Varanasi or Benares, which is in Uttar Pradesh in northern India on the banks of the river Ganges. Yeah, it's a very famous city, especially a famous city for the worship of Shiva. There's a lot of Shiva Lingams there, so it's being mentioned in the same verse as the worship of 12 million Shiva Lingams, right? So just imagine that the whole point is that if you worship 12 Shalagrams, you're obtaining the same results as worshipping 12 million Shiva Lingams on the banks of the Ganges, or by residing in the city of Kashi or Benares for 8 yugas. So normally there are 4 yugas in a cycle. That cycle is called a kalpa, right? A divya yuga. And so there's the Satya Yuga, which is also called Krita Yuga. There's the Treta Yuga, the Dwarf Yuga, and the Kali Yuga. So these are four, like this, sort of like the seasons that we have during the year. We have the spring, we have the summer, we have the winter, and we have the fall or the autumn, and then we have the winter. So twice through, two sets of these, or 8 yugas, would living in Benares or living in the holy city of Kashi, right, can be achieved by worshipping 12 Shalagam Shilas according to the prescribed rules and regulations for only one day. Right? So much effort in worshipping Shiva Lingas, so much effort in living for so many yugas in Kashi, right? It can be achieved simply by worshipping 12 Shalagams for one day. What then can be said of those Vaishnavas who worship more than 12 Shalagam Shilas? I said, so this is Lord Shiva's point. Lord Shiva is saying that, look, here's the benefit of worshipping or living in Benares or worshipping 12 million lingas or whatever. Here's a benefit. Now you can get the same benefit by worshipping 12 Shalagams. What to speak is if you even have more than 12 Shalagams, imagine how much benefit you're getting. The fact is, even the great personalities such as Lord Brahma cannot estimate their position. They cannot estimate the position or the good fortune of a person who worships 12 or more Shalagam Shilas. So now we come to that point that I was talking about before. The buying and selling of Shalagams is prohibited. So we have this word here, nished. Nished. The word nished means forbidden in Sanskrit. So it says, ata tat kraya vikraya. Kraya vikraya. Kraya vikraya means buying and selling. Okay, so elsewhere in the Skanda Purana, right? Please don't laugh that we're saying in the Skanda Purana. We'll go and look it up and see if we can find it. If it's not there, we have to take the word of the acharyas that it's stated there. So Skanda Purana, it talks about the buying and selling of Shalagam, and it talks about that as being prohibited. So let's see what it says here. One who estimates the value of a Shalagam Shila. So imagine you go and you see a Shalagam Shila, and somebody has a Shalagam Shila, and you say, I want that Shalagam Shila, and that person estimates the value. They say, oh, I think this Shalagam Shila is worth so much money or so many jewels. It's worth this much to me. So therefore, he's even just estimating the value, not even selling and buying, but just estimating the value. One who estimates the value, one who sells a Shalagam Shila, right? One who approves estimating the value of Shalagam Shila. Somebody who just says, if you go to someone and you say, what is the value of that Shalagam Shila, right? You're approving of the person making a valuation of the Shila, like that. Or if somebody has a Shila and somebody asks to buy it from him, and he asks another person, well, what do you think it's worth? If you approve of the valuation, so if you make a valuation of a Shila, or if you approve of making the valuation of a Shila, or if you sell a Shila, or one who analyzes the faults and qualities of the Shalagram Shila for the purpose of sale, right? So remember, the previous section we were analyzing different qualities and lakshanas of Shalagram. So it's okay to do that if you want to worship the Shalagram through pure devotion and everything, and even if you want some materialistic purpose, whatever it is. But if you want to worship the Shalagram and you're looking for particular qualities and characteristics there, but not looking for certain qualities and characteristics and lakshanas, right? In order to sell it. Right? If you are trying to look at the qualities in order to put it up for sale, that is not good. So any of these things, valuation, estimating the value, approving of the estimation, right? Selling, right? Buying, right? That person resides in hell until the total dissolution of the creation, material creation. That's a long time. That's a huge time. We're not talking yugas here. We're not talking kalpas here. We're talking till the end of creation, the end of this material, when it's all wound up and goes back inside the body of the Lord. So that is a huge, huge amount of time. long time. So he has to reside in hell for doing that. That's considered a great sin. Therefore, O Brahmana, one should never sell or purchase a shalagram. So I want to tell you a story about this. I was discussing this with Vishwambara Goswami, the father of Padmanabha Goswami, who is one of the present head Goswamis of Radharaman Temple in Vrindavan. He was teaching me Haribhakti Vilasa. I was learning with him. I discussed this with him, and I said, "Well, what happened?" I mean, he said, in his opinion, right, that if you wanted to buy, somebody was selling a shalagram, it's definitely bad. But if you buy a shalagram, if you somehow give somebody some money for a shalagram, right, at least if you are buying with the purpose of worshiping with pure devotion or pure without any any idea of material gain, if you wanted, if your motive was pure to buy the shalagram, that is better than selling. It's still a sin, but it's better than selling. The selling is the worst thing. So we have here some other things here: the valuation, the approving of the valuation, analyzing the faults like that. But selling is really the worst thing. It's really, really the worst thing in this particular sloka. So that's what he was saying. So let's see. Somebody is asking a question. Go ahead, Govindacharya, if you want to ask a question.
Thanks, Swami. It's basically with regard to nowadays you see all of these really, really nicely carved shalagrams, etc., etc. And, you want to buy those. So, and because of, all of the workmanship, etc., that naturally people sell. So would you say that probably it's better not to even carve the shalagram? Because if you carve the shalagram, then people who become attracted to buy them, they're obviously looking at them now to see, well, which one's nicer and which one has better lakshanas and all of these types of things. So would you say, first of all, it's wrong to sell them, but then secondly, what about carving and then selling? Is it that we're paying just for the workmanship, or are we paying, for the shalagram itself?
Okay, so the whole subject of carving shalagrams is there are different opinions. So we have Madhva Vaishnavas who regularly they engage in worshipping carved shalagrams, and so it's definitely accepted in some sampradayas. I've also seen Sri Vaishnavas who have carved shalagrams. So having a carved shalagram means probably somebody carved it, obviously, right? And also because they carved it and they put some workmanship into it, they may be charging the person who is getting the shalagram from them something because of the cost of carving. Right? It's very common in India that you pay for workmanship. You pay something for the workmanship when you get things made of gold or silver. And many times, especially with gold, the gold artisan will take the dust or the scrapings that when he's carved the thing out of gold, or he's polished the thing out of gold, and that is his payment. So of course, nobody's going to carve a shalagram for free, probably. So they're going to want some payment. I've also seen the devotees, sometimes, some Vaishnavas, what they'll do is they have a shalagram and they've been worshipping the shalagram. But normally people will donate shalagrams that haven't been worshipped. They'll say that, I went to the Gandaki River and here I brought some shalagrams here. They donated to somebody else. So as I said, Vishwambara Goswami said it's much better to buy than to sell. Selling is worse than buying. Okay, so then there are some people that they've already worshipped the shalagram, but they have a nice silver throne for the shalagram. They have a silver crown for the shalagram. They worship the shalagram as Krishna, so they have a nice silver flute for the shalagram. So they have some paraphernalia, or they have puja paraphernalia that goes along with the worship. It happens sometimes that somebody dies and the relatives don't want to continue the worship, and they have all the paraphernalia as well as the shalagram. What they want to do is they want to donate the paraphernalia, or they want to give the paraphernalia and the shalagram together to somebody who continue the worship. And sometimes it happens that the families, maybe don't have enough money that they can simply donate all of this silver paraphernalia, which is costly, right? to the other person. So in many cases, what people will do is that people will they'll buy the silver throne and the silver crown and the silver, and they'll estimate what the crown and the flute and the silver shoes and all these silver paraphernalia is worth, and they'll donate that amount of money to the person who gives them the shalagram along with the paraphernalia. So that is a better way to do it. That's a better way to do it. In other words, I'm just buying the puja paraphernalia and I'm donating you the shalagram. And I'm just receiving a shalagram from you and I'm buying the puja paraphernalia with it. So that would be a much better way to do it. So these people who are selling shalagrams on the internet, carving and selling them, my suggestion to them would be to do like this. Make some other silver paraphernalia to go with it, or gold paraphernalia to go with it, some precious metal paraphernalia to go with it, and then say, okay, anybody who wants to buy this silver crown, right? The shalagram will be donated to you freely with the silver crown if you buy this. If you purchase for this price, the silver crown costs this much. Please buy it. This is a way to. Okay, so this is what we call a parihara, or in English. In English, we say loophole. Okay, so many times people go to Brahmins, or nowadays they go to lawyers, or sometimes priests. But you go to a knowledgeable person who's knowledgeable in the law. This is a law. This is in the scripture, and this is a law. It says, if you do like this, it's a sin. If you don't do like this, it's not a sin. So what you have to do is you have to change your activity. If your activity is selling shalagrams, that's a sin. If your activity is selling deity paraphernalia and you're donating shalagrams to go along with the deity paraphernalia, then where's the sin? It's not a sin anymore. So the way to get around this idea of the sin is to do it in such a way that it conforms with the scriptures. Just like we can give the example of animal sacrifice. So somebody wants to eat meat, they sacrifice the animal in a sacrifice which is done according to the scriptures, and then they can eat that meat, right? Like that. So there are different ways to do things which on themselves might be considered sinful, right? But when done in a shastric way, they're not considered sinful. Killing a person is sinful. But killing a person in a righteous war, this was the argument that Arjuna gave to Lord Krishna in the Battle of Kurukshetra. He said, I don't want to go into war and kill these people. These are my friends, my brothers, my teachers, my cousins, right? My relatives. Why would I want to kill them? Killing them is sinful. No, killing them is not sinful if it is done in a righteous way, right? So even killing. So what to speak of this selling shalagram? So we have to do it in a certain way. So now you're asking the question about carved shalagrams. So the first thing is, according to different traditions and different sampradayas. Now I haven't seen any pramanas. I haven't seen anything specifically. Although if we look in the 18th Vilasa of Hari Bhakti Vilasa, we will find it describes that the deity of the Lord can be made out of a stone called shalagram. But there's different ways to interpret that sloka and that sentence. Some people take it literally, and they say, well, we can take the shalagram and we can carve it. Other people say, no, that shalagram stone that they're talking about is a type of hard granite stone which comes from the Deccan Plateau in South India. They have this granite. It comes from a lot of times they call it kadapa, but it's called shalagram stone in the scriptures. So that is a hard black stone. So that hard black stone is what they're talking about when they're talking about carving. So that's what most people believe. The Madhvas and some other people, they believe that you can actually carve the shalagram stone, and so they do that. So now, do we want to encourage that or not encourage that? Actually, if people have a scriptural pramana and they're following their interpretation of their acharyas in their sampradaya, let them do that. Let them do that. Now you have your position is that you either belong to that sampradaya and ascribe to that idea, or you don't belong to that sampradaya, you don't follow those acharyas, and maybe your acharyas have a different idea, or they haven't said anything. If your acharyas in your sampradaya haven't said anything either way, one way or the other, whether it's good or whether it's bad, then you have to make up your mind, and you can make up your own mind. And as Vishwanath Goswami said, you know, if you're buying a shalagram, or you're trying to get a shalagram, you can do it. You can try to do it in such a way as to avoid the sin. The result may be almost the same. The result of me buying a silver crown and getting a free shalagram donated with the silver crown is almost the same as me giving somebody some money for a shalagram, but it's not the same. So we should try to find the loopholes whenever there's a problem like this. People go to Brahmins and they say, "Well, is there a Maharaj Ambarish is the famous example. He was fasting without even taking water, and he had to wait for his guest Durvasa Muni to come back from bathing in the river with his 10,000 disciples, because he was his house guest. He had to wait for him to come, and then only he could take his meal. You can only take your meal after you've fed the guest. So, but he had the sun was rising, and he had to break his fast. So because he had to break his fast, he went to the Brahmins and said, "How can I break my fast in time, right? And not, I made a vow to fast only up until this time, and I must break it at this time. And how can I also satisfy this custom that and not offend my guest and not eat before my guest?" So the Brahmin said, "Okay, there's a loophole. You just simply drink some water. It's considered to be fasting and not fasting." So this is called a parihara, or a loophole. So similarly here, we have to find a loophole. So this is a way to find a loophole. The way to find a loophole is that if there's some deity for sale, if there's some shalagram, whether carved or not carved, because they sell both carved and uncarved shalagrams on the internet, or in some certain shops in India, if there's a loophole there, that you go to a shop and they're selling paraphernalia like that. So you say, "Okay, well, I'll buy this paraphernalia from you, like that, and you please give me a shalagram at the same time, like that." And the person says, "Well, this, the shalagram is 100 rupees, and I'm just giving an example of things. The shalagram is 100 rupees, and the crown is 100 rupees." Like that. No, I'll give you 200 rupees for the crown, and you please donate the shalagram to me. So this becomes a way of doing that. So I'm not sure if I completely answered your question, but was there any? I forget exactly the question. So was there any other point that you wanted to cover with this question about carving shalagrams? Because it has to do with different people's opinion.
I think a good loophole also with respect to buying shalagrams is paying for the workmanship instead of paying for the shalagram itself.
Yeah.
So you're not buying the shalagram, you're just paying for the workmanship of the carving of the shalagram.
Yeah. So you can and the person who's selling too, he can say, I just want payment for my workmanship. I'm not asking for payment for the Sheila. It's a fine line, okay? So I don't know if these fine lines, these technicalities are noted down by Yamaraj, or Lord Vishnu. Oh yeah, he made a loophole, so he gets away with it. No, okay, I don't know. It works in these sort of technicalities, and they tend to work with lawyers in material courtrooms. I think the Supreme Lord knows our mind and our intention. So the person who is selling shalagram, the Supreme Lord knows your intention. If your intention is to try to make money, if materialistic greed is your intention from selling the shalagram, he knows that. If you are a poor person and you're relative died who was worshipping Shalagram, and you can't afford to give away all the silver paraphernalia, but you're selling it and you're donating the Shalagram to someone else, I think the Lord will understand that too. So the Lord understands that mentality. And similarly, if I'm buying a Shalagram, then the Lord will know, oh, this person is buying a Shalagram for some material reason, or he's buying the Shalagram because he really wants to worship the Lord, and he has this opportunity. And the person who's selling may be a rascal, but this person seems to have a good intention. So the Lord will see these things. The Lord knows our internal reasons, but as far as possible, we should also try to externally. We should try to do it in a way which cannot be criticized from the point of view of Shastra, like that. So, okay, that's nice. So maybe we can move on from this point. It's a really interesting point, but as I said, we'll look at later on when we come to, remind me when we come to the 18th Vilasa about this verse that talks about carving the Shalagram stone, and what it actually means. Now we come to a different prohibition. In the 438th sloka verse, it talks about pratishta. The word pratishta, tishta means to stand. Pratishta makes to make something stand, or to place on the altar, to make them stand on the altar. Pratishta means the installation of a deity. And normally in the installation of the deity, we do avahanam. Although the Lord is everywhere and he's within every atom and he's within our heart, we call him by a process called avahanam, and that means we pray to him to manifest in that particular deity and to reciprocate through that deity when we worship that deity. That is called pratishta, right? And there are many rituals to be performed for pratishta, right? And there are two types of pratishta. There's the pratishta of permanently installed deities and temporarily installed deities. And with the temporarily installed deity or the movable deity, that has to be done each and every time before we do the worship. Whereas with the permanent deity, we don't have to do that every time. But here, what it said is that normally the moving deity will be invoked, or we will do the pratishta every time, each and every time that we worship it. But here it's saying, although Shalagram is a movable deity, we do not do, because it's a self-manifest deity of Lord Krishna, that we do not do the pratishta for Shalagram Sheila. So this is a special quality of the Shalagram Sheila, or any self-manifest deity, but self-manifest deities are very rare. Shalagrams are the exception. They are not rare. Maybe rare in some places, but if you go to the Gandaki River, there's lots of Shalagrams. So the installation of a Shalagram Sheila is prohibited, and this is from the same Purana. So it says here, so this is, we're talking from Skanda Purana. So we also would like to find this verse, and we should look in Skanda Purana and see if we can find it. So it says in that Purana, it says, it is prohibited to install the Shalagram Sheila. That is because the Lord is already, he's already there, self-manifesting himself there. A learned devotee should first conduct a very grand worship of Shalagram Sheila and then continue worshiping every day according to his ability. So in some ways, this is a very good pramana, shastric statement, because it tells us how we should worship the Lord, right? When we first start worship, right, of either the deity or the Shalagram. In the case of the deity, we have to do the installation first. In the case of the Shalagram, we don't have to do the installation first. But what do? In both cases, we do a grand worship. We do a very nice worship in the first day, and then as much as possible every day after that, we continue that grand scale of worship. Now, if you can't worship the Lord on a grand scale every day, at least on the first day, and Prabhupada mentions this in Chaitanya Charamrita in I think it's the 23rd chapter of the Madhya Lila, around 200 or 300, around the verses between 200 and 300 is a description of different of the installation of the deity, and also of different services that we offer to the deity. And this comes in a section where Lord Chaitanya is talking to Sananda Swami about writing Hari Bhakti Vilasa. So here it is mentioned in Hari Bhakti Vilasa. So that's very interesting. So we can see that not only Sanatan and Gopal Bhatta Goswamis have written this in Hari Bhakti Vilas, but we can see why they have written it, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically told them to write this and to explain these things, these particular things in Hari Bhakti Vilas. So that's very nice. Let's continue on. 439. It is concluded by learned transcendentalists that among all places where the Lord is said to reside, such as the sun, as well as all forms of the Supreme Lord, the Shalagam Sheila is the best. So this is a glorification of the Shalagam Sheila above and beyond all other places that the Lord resides, including when we worship the Lord in Sandhya Vandanam, we're worshiping Surya Narayana within the sun. The Lord is there within the sun globe, the Pratyaksha Devata, the God that we can always see in the sky. The form of God, he can be worshipped in many other places in the Bhagavatam in the 11th canto, 27th chapter, which is Lord Krishna's instructions on deity worship. He mentions he can be worshipped in fire, he can be worshipped in water, he can be worshipped in there are several different forms, and we get those 8 different material forms that the Lord can manifest in after he's been installed or invoked. But here, the Shalagam Sheila is considered to be the best. So, continuing on, the next text, 440 to 442, explains more about this being the best place where the Lord manifests. The Shalagam Sheila is the best residence of the Supreme Lord. Now, from Padma Purana, that's confirmed. It says, by worshipping Sri Hari within the heart, he's there within the heart as a super soul Paramatman, within water, as a deity, a Murti, as he resides in the sun, or on a sanctified altar. The word for sanctified altar is going to be given here as standila, standileshu. It means in, okay, so we have it here, in the heart, Hridi, Surya, in the sun, Jale, right, in water. The word va means or, right? Pratima means a murti, which is created or carved or molded. Right, Sandileshu means the fire ceremony, the fire altar, like that. So these are all places where the Lord is invoked and worshipped, like that. So devotees become qualified to return to the abode of the Lord by worshipping the Lord in all these different forms. If those who desire liberation are not satisfied by worshipping the Lord in any of those forms, right, they should worship Lord Vasudeva as a Shalagram Sheila adorned with the markings of the chakras. O Vaishya, the Shalagram Sheila, form of Lord Vishnu, frees one from sinful reactions, awards one the result of piety, and ultimately liberates the worshipper from material bondage. Continuing on, text 443. Again, Kartik Mahatmyam section, right? Glories of October, November month in Padma Purana. Again, the conversation between Yama and Dhumrakesh, right? It mentions, O Prince, it is recommended that one worship Lord Vishnu in his form as the deity. The deity is said to be made of 8 varieties: stone, wood, earth, paint, sand, mind, and jewels. I think they left out metal, excuse me. Stone, wood, metal, earth, paint, sand, mind, and jewels. Right. So these are all, you can worship the Lord in the form of a jewel if there's a gem. You can, in the mind, of course, you can worship the Lord. Mental deity, mental worship. In sand means sand or clay or earth, type of very temporary deity, like that. Paint means a picture or a photograph. In modern understanding would be like a photograph or a picture. Many people in South India, they have these pictures of deities. They have these paintings of deities, which they call Tanjore or Mysore forms type paintings, which are encrusted with jewels and real gold leaf. So they're very much, and they're worshipped like deities in people's houses, these paintings. So paintings are often worshipped as the Supreme Lord. Earth, again, like the sand, earth and sand, temporary form of the deity. Metal and stone deities and wooden deities we're very much familiar with. So like Jagannath wooden deities, Daru Brahma, he's called the wooden Supreme, Daru Brahma. and stone and metal. So continuing on with text 444, when the Shalagram Sheila is worshipped, it should be understood that Lord Krishna is being directly worshipped. Vasudeva, meaning Krishna, the original spiritual master of the universe, eternally resides in the Shalagram Sheila. So it's just reiterating the whole point that it's a self-manifest deity of Lord Krishna. Continuing with text 445, Skande Kartik Mahatmya Shiva Skanda Samvadi. So again, from that Mahatmyam that we couldn't find, I did find in Skanda Purana the discussion between Shiva, I think Shiva and Kartikeya. I think I found it, but I didn't find exactly the verses I was looking for. But again, I only looked very quickly, so I'm not sure about this. I'll have to do more research onto this, because this seems to be a very, very interesting section of Skanda Purana. So in the Kartik Mahatmyam, again, Skanda Purana, and the conversation between Shiva and Kartikeya, again it says, Lord Hari does not always reside in a deity made of gold, jewels, or stone. Right? So we're going to see later on in the 19th Vilasa, it talks about how a deity can be made of the Supreme Lord from gold, from jewels, from stone, or whatever. And then it can be installed, and the Lord can be invoked in the deity, and we can be worshipped. But then certain offenses can occur, right? Certain things can occur, which makes the Lord not accept worship in that form anymore. The Lord doesn't always have to reside in that form, right? Or in the case of a movable deity, he is asked to reside in the form and accept our worship, and then afterwards he is valedicted, and he is said to go back and be again worshipped in Vaikuntha by his eternal servants, and not to permanently reside in that form. So here he says that the Lord always resides, however, in the Shalagram Sheila. It's a self-manifest deity, and it's always a form of God. He's always present there, right? So continuing to 446, in another place it is in there. That is why it is said, and in another place it said, the extraordinary glories of the Narasimha Sheila can be understood from as follows. A tulsi leaf offered to his holy feet destroys the sin of killing a Brahmin. Water that has washed his lotus feet nullifies the sin of stealing, right? These are all what we call mahapatikas, or great sins, right? Great sins, right? Water, the sin of stealing, and his remnants of food destroy the sins of drinking wine and having intimate relations, right, or sexual relations with the wife of one's spiritual master. By remembering him and associating with his devotees, one becomes delivered from the fault of associating with the above mentioned sinners. So not only the sins, it's not only a sin to perform these great sins, these mahapatikas, right, these 5 mahapatikas, or it is even a sin to associate with people who are these or sinners who are doing these sins. And simply by worshiping the Shalagram Sheila, specifically here Narasimha Sheila, it says, right, because it says here in the last line, Shalagram Sheila Narasimha Mahima, right? So it's specifically the Narasimha Sheila, right? That all those sins will be nullified. All those sins will be nullified. And so what does it say here about the Naivedyam, right? Okay, so yeah. So I would point out that actually I just wanted to make one point here that okay, so killing a Brahmin is a great sin, or killing a great devotee or a great Vaishnava, right, is a sin, is a Mahapatika, a great sin. Stealing is considered to be a great sin, right? Drinking wine, right? Drinking wine is considered to be a great sin. Now, actually, in the Dharma Shastras, there's 2 situations like this. There's 2 words for wine or intoxicating beverages in the in the Dharma Shastras. One is a type of wine, and there's another thing called sura, which is a hard liquor or very, very strong alcohol. So there's actually a distinction made in the Dharma Shastras between lesser and stronger types of alcohol. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up. Both taking either of them as simple, but the one is the Mahapatika. This is talking about the Mahapatika. It means drinking very strong liquor, right? And then having intimate relations with the wife of the guru, the spiritual master. Usually, the spiritual master is a grihasta, and he has an ashrama. He has a family. He lives with his family, and different people, students come and live with the family, and that is called a gurukula. Kula means family. So the family of the guru, living with the family of the guru, means being in gurukula. so having intimate relationships with an intimate relationship with the wife of the guru, right? If the teacher is a woman with the husband, like that, of the guru, like that. So whatever it is. So girls might be learning from a woman spiritual master, like in the case of Sita, when Lord Krishna, when Lord Rama went to the forest and he was exiled to the forest, Sita Devi went with him, and she didn't know how to do anything in the forest. She wasn't trained up on how to live in a forest, how to cook in a forest, how to keep house in the forest. So she was trained up by Anasuya, who was the wife of a rishi that Lord Rama learned, or he knew a little bit about how to exist in a forest. But anyway, she was trained up, so she had a guru who was the rishi's wife, taught her what to eat in the forest, how to cook in the forest, how to live in the forest. Okay, so continuing on. 447 describes, even if one supposedly knows everything, he cannot estimate the waves of the ocean of the Shalagam Sheila's glories. So you can, even if you think that you know the glories of Shalagam, you don't know. They're so much greater than what you think, what you can estimate. Anybody can estimate. So the worship of the Shalagam Sheila is eternal. Okay, so the word here for eternal, which is being translated as eternal by the translator, is nityata. Now, nityata can mean eternal, right? It can also mean daily, right? So we have the nitya and naimitika kriyas, the different activities or rituals that we do either daily or occasionally. So one is nitya and one is naimitika. One is naimitika. So nitya can mean eternal, but it also can mean daily. That here we may a better translation here than the one that the translator is given is the worship of the Shalagam Sheila here is to be done daily. It's to be done every day. So if we have a Shalagam, we should worship it every day, like that. Once you begin the worship of Shalagam, it's a self-manifest deity. You should continue as far as possible, like that. You shouldn't miss the worship of the Shalagam. So if you cannot worship the Shalagam, then you can have someone else in the house and someone else in the family do the Shalagam worship. Or if you really can't do the Shalagam worship, you need to give it to somebody else, and somebody else can do that worship. And it can continue in that way, right? So that's what it means here by Shalagam Nitya. A person who eats before worshipping the Shalagam Sheila will live as a worm and stool of degraded people, such as dog eaters. So apparently, here the scripture is making a distinction between the stool of Brahmins and the stool of dog eaters, or a stool of different types of people, and saying they're very, very degraded people. Their stool must be worse than other people's stool. And if you eat before you worship the Shalagam, if you're worshiping your Shalagam, but you're eating first, right? You're going to go to hell, and you're going to be reincarnated as some worm in some very degraded person's stool. So it's a really, really horrible message here. This is, again, we may take this as a hyperbole, scriptural hyperbole, right? But the idea is to encourage people not to eat or drink before they worship the Shalagam Sheila. or any deity, actually. We should always worship the Supreme Lord first. Now, this makes sense because it makes very much sense because in the worship of the Lord, either in the deity form or the Shalagram Shila form, right, at the end of the worship, near to the end of the worship, we offer the food offering to the Lord. And the Vaishnavas, we only take the food which is offered to the Lord. So if we're taking food before we worship the Lord, it means that we didn't offer it to the Lord. So we therefore should wait until we offer it to the Lord first. And after we offer it to the Lord, it's another way of saying only eat what you offer to the Lord first. That's what it's basically saying. It's encouraging people to do that by telling them the result will be so bad if you don't follow this principle, if you eat before you worship. So, continuing with 449. In the Skanda Purana, again in the Skanda Purana, right, the body of a person who has no interest in worshipping Shalagram Shila will be pierced by the sharp peaks of mountains. Okay, so maybe if you fall out of a plane without a parachute, you may land on a sharp peak of a mountain and be pierced. So I can't really understand how you would be pierced by the sharp peaks of mountains without doing that, something like that. But anyway, the point here is that one should have interest in worshipping the Lord as a devotee, and one should not say, okay, I'm a devotee, but I only want to worship deities. I'm afraid of worshipping Shalagam Shila because I just read this. If I do this wrong or that wrong, I'm going to face some horrible reaction to some offense. So you shouldn't be afraid of worshipping Shalagam Shila. People shouldn't be afraid of worshipping Shalagam Shila. They should be interested in the worship of the Lord. Continuing on, text 450. Therefore, everyone, whether a Brahman, woman, a Sudra, should engage in worshipping the Supreme Lord in his form of Shalagam Shila after being duly initiated. Right? And here it says Bhagavata. So it says Dvijay, Brahmins, Stribis, ladies, and Sudrais. Now, normally, in general Smarta Hindu society, Sudras and who are in the lowest rung of the society socially in the Varnashram system, right, in India, and the ladies are not usually the people who are allowed to worship the Shalagam Shila by scripture, and we're going to discuss that just now. That the Goswamis is saying that these people are generally not supposed to worship Shalagam Shila, but in fact, according to Vaishnava system, according to the Vaishnava philosophy, Sudras and ladies can worship the Shalagam Shila, right, if they're Vaishnavas. So that's why the translator has added this here, after being duly initiated. That I don't really see that in the Sanskrit, but the point is he's added that to explain the Vaishnava idea. The Vaishnava idea and the Vaishnava doctrine is that once we are initiated, we can worship the Lord in any of his forms. So it's not just that Sudras and it's not just that Brahmins and male Vaishnavas can worship, but ladies can worship, Sudras can worship also, as long as they're initiated. So continuing on, here says, in a conversation between Lord Brahma and Narada Muni regarding the worship of Shalagam Shila in connection to the vow of Chaturmasya, which is the four months of the rainy season in India, right? So in Skanda Purana, it has been stated. So Chaturmasya is a long description. There's going to be a discussion about Chaturmasya in one of the other sections of Hari Bhakti Vilasa, so we don't need to go into that here. But just understand that this particular section, there's a conversation between Brahma and Narada, right? Narada is a rishi who's a son of one of the sons of Brahma, and they're talking about how people who is qualified to worship the Shalagam Shila. So Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Vaishyas are qualified to worship the Shalagam Shila, right? So straight off the bat, everybody knows this in India. All Smarta Hindus and all Sampradayas, all except that Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya males are qualified to worship the Shalagam Shila. Now, then what about the females? What about the ladies? And what about the Sudras? And even beyond the Sudras, the Panchamas, the people of even lower class or caste than the Sudras, right? Really, in actual fact, there's only 4 castes, so 4 classes. So when people talk about Panchamas, the 5th class, or people who are Chandalas or Mlechas or Yavanas whatever, all these other names that are there in some of the medieval Dharma Shastras, for people who are barbarians and outside of Vedic culture. So when they talk about people like that, they're really not part of a separate class, right? They're all considered part of the lowest class or the fourth class. But anyway, here it's automatically male Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas are automatically understood to be qualified to worship Shalagam Sheila. And why is that? Because they are all doing Sanyavandana, they are all initiated in the Vedic initiation, which is Upanayanam, and they are all therefore worshipping the Lord with the Gayatri Mantra in the sun, Lord Narayana in the sun. So they're, as stated in the previous verse, they're duly initiated. It's a Vedic initiation, you know. Now they might also be Vaishnavas. But now let's go on further. See, otherwise he is not, right? If a Sudra is a devotee of Lord Hari, right? And we can add a lady here also, but if a Sudra is a devotee of Lord Hari, then he's also qualified. Otherwise he's not. So here the definition is being given by Brahma to Narada, right? And Narada is very important for the Pancharatra system, right? That the real point here is that whether somebody is a devotee of Hari is the qualification. If you're a devotee of Lord Hari, if you're a Vaishnava, if you're a devotee of Krishna, then you're qualified to worship the Shalagam Sheila. And in fact, you're qualified to worship any form of the Lord. So the Brahmana who is not a devotee of Lord Vishnu is not qualified to, this is in brackets, the translator has tried to explain this by also explaining the opposite, right? The opposite point is that a Brahmin who's not a devotee, and I would say Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, anybody who's not a devotee, who's not a Vaishnava, they are not qualified to worship the Shalagram Sheila, but a Shalagram, they're not qualified to worship Shalagram Sheila, but a Sudra who's attached to the devotional service of Lord Hari or Krishna is qualified to worship Shalagram Sheila. The word Sat Sudra in this verse. Now here we have, right? Brahmana Kshatriya Visham. This Sat should come on the next line. Sat Sudranam Atapiva, right? So I mean Sat Sudranam. So it's just not an ordinary Sudra, but a Sat Sudra, right? Or Sattvic Sudra, Sat Sudra, or internal Sudra, right? We have people in India called sadhus, Sattu, Sadhu. Sadhus means a person who's interested in eternal things, in spiritual things, is a sadhu, right? So a Sat Sudra is a Sudra. He may have been born in a particular caste, or he may belong to a low profession or part of society, in material society, but he's interested in eternal things. He's interested in the Supreme Lord and the worship of God, the worship of Lord Hari or Krishna. So he's called a Sat Sudra. So that Sat Sudra, right? The word Sat Sudra in this verse refers to a Sudra who's inclined to devotional service to Lord Hari. So now elsewhere in the same Purana, that Purana was, let's see, looks like Skanda Purana. Yeah. Elsewhere in the same Purana, it says, Striyova Yadiva Sudra, right? This is a very important Pramana for anybody, right? Striyova Yadiva Sudra, right? Brahmana Kshatriyadayaha Pujayitva Sheila Chakra Labante Shasvatam Padam, right? So here we have, it does not matter whether one is a woman, a Sudra, a Brahmin, or a Kshatriya. Anyone who worships the Shalagam Sheila attains the eternal abode of the Supreme Lord. Now, why is that an important pramana? Because it doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a Sudra or a Brahmin. Then if you worship the Shalagam Sheila, you'll attain the Supreme Lord. That's a proof right here that women and Sudras and Brahmins and Kshatriyas, everybody can worship the Shalagam. That's a proof. So continuing on with section slokas 453 to 455, according to those who are the knowers of the truth, the statements prohibiting the worship of the Shalagam Sheila by Sudras and women that are found in the scriptures are applicable only to those who are not devotees of Vishnu. An example of a prohibitory injunction is, and he gives an example of a scriptural sentence which prohibits women and Sudras from worshipping Shalagam. It says here, right? So this is a quote from some other scripture. Whether pure or impure, only Brahmins are qualified to worship me. So this is the Lord himself saying, only Brahmins can worship me. So not even Kshatriyas, not even Sudra, not even Vaishyas, right? I feel the touch of a Shudra or a woman to be more painful than a thunderbolt. This is a statement given in some Shastra, right? If a Shudra utters the sacred syllable Om, right? What to speak of a woman, right? Worships a Shalagram Sheila or enjoys sex with a Brahmin woman, he surely becomes a dog eater. So here, not only do we have the worship of Shalagram being decried, but also the mixture of castes, and also not only that, but also the chanting of sacred mantras beginning with Om cannot be done by Sudras and women, which is another thing which is there in the Dharma Shastras, which give the rules for the medieval Varnashram system in India. Nowadays, this is not followed by many people. And people don't accept this as women are chanting Om, women are worshipping Shalagram like that. So here, the Gaudiya Vaishnava Goswamis are showing their liberality in the acceptance of women and Shudras, as long as they're devotees of Krishna, as long as they're Vaishnavas in the worship of the Shalagram. And they're also saying, conversely, if you're not a Vaishnava, if you're not a devotee of Krishna, then you don't really have any qualification to worship the Lord or worship the Shalagram. So, continuing on with text 456, right? Vaishnavas should treat the Shalagram Sheila as more dear than their own lives. While worshipping the Shalagram Sheila, one should worship a Dwarka Sheila as well. Okay, so this is a very interesting pramana, right? That says one should worship a Dwarka Sheila as well. Now, we haven't heard about a Dwarka Sheila yet, so they're going to explain about what Dwarka Sheilas are. Dwarka Sheilas are a type of coral that comes from the sea off the coast of Dwarka, which is the place of Lord Krishna's. Krishna moved his capital from Mathura to Dwarka because of some military reasons to keep away from being under attack all the time. And so later on, that city of Dwarka, a lot of it went under the sea, which can still be seen if you go scuba diving off Dwarka. You can still see the relics of that ancient capital of Lord Krishna. So in that place, is this coral, and the coral has also got chakras in it, just like the Shalagram Sheilas have in Nepal. So this is also considered to be a self-manifest deity of the Lord. In this case, it is a Sheila or a stone, it's actually coral, coming from Dwarka. So it's called a Dwarka Sheila, whereas the one from Nepal is called a Shalagram Sheila because it comes from this area called Shalagram, where the Gandaki River runs. So, continuing on with 457. So it's saying here that if you worship the Shalagram, you should have a Shalagram and you should also have a Dwarka Sheila together. That's a good thing to worship them both together. So here, the glories of worshipping Shalagram along with Dwarka Sheila are going to be explained. In the Brahma Purana, it says there's no doubt that wherever there is worship of the Shalagram Sheila or Dwarka Sheila, liberation stands nearby. So that's nice. So then, again, in the conversation between Brahma and Narada in the Skanda Purana, it talks about the Dwarka Sheila. It says, "O great sage, all kinds of prosperity increase where the Dwarka Sheila and the Shalagram Sheila worshipped together." So elsewhere in the Skanda Purana, in text 459, it says, "A devotee who worships the Dwarka Sheila along with 12 Shalagram Sheilas will be worshipped in Vaikuntha." Right? So you have a Dwarka Sheila and you have 12 Shalagrams. Again, that was called a Chetra. If you have 144, it's called a Dham. And if you worship together with the Gomati Chakra, it's called also Gomati Chakra. The Dwarka Sheila is also called Gomati Chakra sometimes because there's the river Gomati in Gujarat, which flows through Dwarka. And in fact, if you go to Dwarka today, you can go and you can jump in the river and you can go and you take bath in all the ghats by floating down the river in front of all the ghats. Means like you're taking bath in all the different ghats, and there's all these different results that you get from taking bath in all the different ghats, and then finally you come into the ocean. So there are these Gomati Chakras or Gomati Sheilas or Dwarka Sheilas or Dwarka Chakras, right? Which are the Dwarka Sheilas that we're talking about here. So now that we've introduced this different thing, worshipping Shalagram with the Dwarka Sheila, let's understand the lakshanas or the qualities of the Dwarka Sheila, because we never heard about this before. We've talked about the qualities and characteristics of Shalagrams. Now let's talk about the characteristics of Dwarka Sheilas. So in texts 460 to 462, he's going to give the example from the Prahlad Samhita. So there's a book called Prahlad Samhita. Obviously, Prahlad is the devotee of Lord Narasimha, son of Hiranyakashipu, the great devotee of Lord Krishna. He's a Mahajan, a great authority on Vaishnavism. He's going to tell us about the characteristics of the Dwarka Sheila. So here it says, a Dwarka Sheila with one chakra. So remember, they've got these little chakras on them, like the Shalagrams in Nepal. They've got these little discus markings, which indicate that they are self-manifest deities of Lord Vishnu or Krishna. The Dwarka Sheila with one chakra is known as Sudarshana. With two chakras is known as Lakshmi Narayana. With four chakras is called Janardana. With 5 chakras is known as Vasudeva. With 6 chakras is known as Pradyumna. With 7 chakras is known as Baladeva, and I have a Baladeva Dwarka Sheila. It has 7 chakras, right? Which I keep with my Krishna Sheila, so Krishna and Balaram together. So then, okay, so with 8 chakras is called Purushottama. With 9 chakras is called Nava Vyuha. With 10 chakras is known as Dasamurti. Dasamurti meaning the Das avatars, the 10 different avatars of Lord Vishnu. With 11 chakras is known as Aniruddha, and with 12 chakras is called Dwarasatmaka. The word Dwarasa means 12. Dwarasatmaka means the great souled one who appeared in 12 forms. Okay, so Dwarka Sheilas with more than 12 chakras are known as Ananta. So really simple. If you want to learn how, there's some more is going to be explained underneath, a different way of understanding. But if you want to know how to judge the name of a Dwarka Sheila, very, very simple. Just count the number of chakras. And normally people have Dwarka Sheilas which are quite big, and they have many, many chakras. And so the normal Dwarka Sheila that you'll find is called Ananta. I happen to have one with 7, which is Balaram, one with 9, which is called, in this case, it's called Navavyuha, or it's also called Narasimha. And I have another one which is Ananta, which has more than 14. More than 12 chakras. Okay, so continuing on with the Mahatmyam, or the glories of these different Dwarka Sheilas that have at least 12 chakras, right, or 1 to 12 different chakras. In the Varaha Purana, it said that any Shalagram Sheila that's marked with the Lord's chakra is sanctified. Right? Any Sheila, does it say here exactly? It doesn't exactly say which Sheila, Vishnu Chakrena. Right? So anything that has the mark of Lord Vishnu's chakra or discus is sanctified. Simply by touching it, one becomes free from all sinful reactions. Now, from the Garuda Purana, it suggests in text 464, all one's desires can be fulfilled simply by worshipping a Shalagram Sheila such as the Sudarshana Sheila. So again, these are general verses of glorification of Shalagram, both of these, right? That say that because of the chakra, right? If you touch the Shalagram, you get freed of all sinful reactions. If you worship a Shalagram, you have all your desires fulfilled, etc., like that. So in Skanda Purana, once again, back to Skanda Purana, in 465, it says, if a devotee worships Shalagram Sheila marked with chakras, whether with pure devotion or without pure devotion, even if you have some material reason for worship, he will be liberated from material entanglement, even if he's the most simple person. Of this there's no doubt. Now we have a Mahatmyam statement by Lord Brahma in the Dwarka Mahatmyam, which is the Mahatmyam about Dwarka, the place of Lord Krishna on the seaside in Gujarat, like that, the holy city of Dwarka, like that, where those chakras, those Gomati Chakras or Dwarka Sheilas come from. A Shalagram Sheila with marks of chakras is known as Chakratirtha, the place of chakras, right? If such a Shalagram Sheila is worshipped, even in the country of the Mlecchas, and it says specifically here, Mleccha Desh, right? The sinful people residing there can be delivered. This is a very important pramana here. So if people say, oh, you have Shalagrams, but you're in foreign countries, you shouldn't worship you shouldn't take shalagrams to foreign countries. No, specifically the Shastra says you can do that, and it'll be effective also. So here we have other different results from worshipping shalagrams or Gomati chakras with different numbers of chakras, right? So here it comes from the Kapila Pancharatra. So there's a Kapila Samhita, which is may have something to do with the being spoken by Lord Kapila Dev, Rishi Kapila, the incarnation of Lord Kapila, right? And it's a Pancharatra Agama. So here is a lot of verses, 467 to 473 on that subject. A Dwarka Sheila with one chakra is called Sudarshana. So we heard this before, right? So that's just reiterating the same thing as before. We're going to hear some of the names given are going to be a little different from the list given before. So Sudarshana was the same. So one chakra Sudarshana, he bestows liberation on the worshipper. Dwarka Sheila with two chakras is known as Lakshmi Narayana. That was also said before. But the fruit of worshipping him wasn't said. So he awards the worshipper with material enjoyment and liberation. A Dwarka chakra with three chakras is known as a Chuta. That's a little different because we didn't have, before it didn't mention if he had three chakras. He awards the worshipper the position of Indra. A Dwarka Sheila with four chakras is called Chaturbhuja. Chaturbhuja means Vishnu with four arms. So there was a different name before. He bestows the four objects of life. What are the four objects of life or the four goals of life? They're called Purusharthas, and they are Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, religiosity or righteousness, right? Material wealth, right? Or money, like that. Happiness, or your desires, right? And liberation, like that. Okay, so these are the four things. So then he removes, Dwarka Sheila with five chakras is called Vasudeva, and he removes the fear of birth and death. The Dwarka Sheila with six chakras is known as Prajumna, right? He awards the opulence and beauty upon the worshipper. A Dwarka Sheila with seven chakras is known as Baladeva. He bestows upon the worshipper fame and progeny. A Dwarka Sheila with eight chakras is known as Purushottama. He fulfills all the desires worshippers, the worshippers' desires, A Dwarka Sheila with nine chakras is known as Narasimha. He gives excellent rewards to his worshippers. Okay, so I have one Dwarka Sheila with nine chakras. That is Narasimha, right? So not all Narasimha Sheilas are black in color. There are white ones also. These are the Dwarka Sheilas with the nine chakras. Okay, he gives excellent rewards to his worshippers. A Dwarka Sheila with 10 chakras is known as the Dasa Avatar, right? So it was called Dasa Murti in the last list. So that's fine, same thing, right? He awards the worshipper a kingdom. The Dwarka Sheila with 11 chakras is known as Aniruddha. He blesses one with wealth, and the Dwarka Sheila with 12 chakras is called Dwarasatmaka, same as in the last list. He awards the worshipper happiness and liberation. So continuing on with text 474 to 476, we're coming to the end of the chapter, and we have faults and qualities according to the color, right? And it says here, in the same literature, it is stated elsewhere. A black Dwarka Sheila can be the cause of death. A gray Dwarka Sheila causes fear within the mind. A multicolored Dwarka Sheila causes illness. A bluish Dwarka color Sheila destroys one's wealth, right? So normally they're white, okay? So if they're any other color than that, it's not considered to be a good thing, right? The worship of Dwarka Sheila with a hole will cause one misery, will cause one to become distressed. A yellow Dwarka Sheila causes great misery. A broken Dwarka Sheila causes one to lose his wife. Worship of a white Dwarka Sheila awards one good children and grandchildren, wealth, and other assets of material happiness. For this reason, one should worship a white Dwarka Sheila, and most of them are pure white. Right. So from the Prahlad Samhita, text 477 to 478 describes a little bit more. It says a black Dwarka Sheila brings death, a brown Dwarka Sheila gives constant fear, a multicolored Dwarka Sheila brings disease, a yellow Dwarka Sheila destroys one's wealth, a gray Dwarka Sheila also exhausts one's wealth, and a broken Dwarka Sheila separates one from his wife. One should never worship Dwarka Sheilas that have uneven chakras or holes, right? Nor should one worship those that are triangular, right? So I have one which is slightly triangular, okay, and or having the shape of a half moon, like a crescent moon. Then continuing on, text 479 to 480, coming between the two sages, Garga and Galava, right, have mentioned that a Dwarka Sheila with equal chakras gives one pleasure. A Dwarka Sheila with 12 chakras is very auspicious. Completely round and square Dwarka Sheilas worship happiness. One should never worship a Dwarka Sheilas that are triangular, having odd-looking chakras, having holes which are broken or shaped like a half moon. There is no possibility of receiving any benefit by worshipping such Dwarka Sheilas. Okay, so I would suggest this. Thus ends the translation of the fifth Vilasa of the Hari Bhakti Vilasa. Now, I would suggest also that a lot of these defects here, that we can look back and we can see some pramanas in the previous section about shalagrams, which say that actually you can worship any type of shalagram. And I would say the same thing really applies to the Dwarka Sheila, that all these negative quotations here about broken Sheilas or triangular Sheilas or different types of Sheilas that are different colored ones like that, they all need to be disregarded. That actually, if you're a devotee of Vishnu, if you're a devotee of Krishna, if you're a Vaishnava and you have a pure motive, the worship of any type of Dwarka Sheila is good, like that. Now, it may be that Sakama Puja, people who are worshipping for material benefits, they should avoid these particular types of Sheilas, but I would say that the Vaishnava doesn't have to do that. There really isn't anything in the section on Dwarka Sheilas to say that, but in general, the section on shalagrams was also saying that. So we see that the shalagrams were mentioned a little bit in the Dwarka Sheila section as well. So I think you can take both of the sections in that sense, that we can worship any Dwarka Sheila like that. So now we come to the end. That's the end of the fifth Vilasa.